everyone. Please do let me know if you can hear me and see me. We'll start in about 1 minute's time. Hello everyone, my name's Lucy McRobert and this is part of the Earth Live lessons which have been put together by the phenomenal Lizzie Daly. We cannot tell you as presenters how hard Lizzie has worked to make sure that we all present these in a really professional way. She's taught us how to use YouTube, which was a whole new world. So yeah, if there's any problems, if you can't hear me, if you can't see me, please do comment now because I'm going to get stuck into Ospreys in a minute, and at that point I won't be concentrating on the technicalities. So yeah, let me know that you can see and hear me okay, and let me inspire you with my favourite bird. So who am I? My name is Lucy McRobert and I am a wildlife storyteller first and foremost. Now, bit of a secret here, don't tell Lizzie, I'm not actually a scientist. I know, it's like a criminal thing in the conservation world. I'm actually a historian by training. I went to the University of Nottingham and I studied history. And in my second year, decided I didn't really like history that much anymore. And I did a module in environmental history. And that set me on this path to working in professional conservation. Throughout my time in conservation, I've worked for the wildlife trusts in communications and in campaigns. I was the researcher on Tony Juniper's book, What Nature Does for Britain. I set up the Youth Nature Network, a focus on nature. But for me, one of the most important and inspiring jobs that I ever did was back in 2014 when I was the education officer for the Rutland Osprey project, which is part of the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. It was just a 6-month contract job, but it absolutely shaped my life, it shaped my career, and it was the most exciting thing that I've ever done, getting to work with these absolutely phenomenal birds. Fingers crossed all of this works. Come on. There we go. So why do I love ospreys? There are 3 things that I think make ospreys absolutely phenomenal. 1 is they have amazing adaptations. 2, they go on this absolutely marvellous migration, which I'm going to tell you all about. And 3, if I have time, I'm going to cover some of the remarkable stories that make ospreys absolutely outstanding and why they are probably the bird that has most shaped my story within the conservation movement. And I would argue probably the most influential bird in Britain when you look at the conservation movement as a whole. So what is an osprey? Let's start with that. First of all, this lovely model here is showing you a t-shirt with all of the birds of prey in Britain on. Ospreys are a bird of prey. This means that they live exclusively on animal flesh is the official definition. And they also are adapted with a very specific shaped beak and also with very specific shaped talons. As you can see, this one here is the osprey, and it is the 3rd largest bird of prey in the UK, coming in behind white-tailed eagles and golden eagles. That means it's bigger than buzzards, red kites, any of the falcons, but it sits in that same family as falcons, owls, harriers, buzzards, hawks, all of those birds that we call birds of prey or raptors. Now, this is very bad quality, so I'm going to talk over the video. Don't worry. Hopefully I can get it to work. This is a piece of footage that was taken at Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust Nature Reserve, Linden Nature Reserve, a few years ago, and it shows an osprey fishing. When we think about the kind of adaptations that ospreys have, they are a very specific bird of prey in the UK. They are the only bird of prey that exclusively eats fish. So they don't take mammals, they don't take other birds, they don't eat insects. It's just all about the fish. And that means they have had to evolve in a very specific way. They catch their prey live. Ospreys don't like taking fish from the side of a lake or a reservoir. They don't like taking fish that's already dead. So to do this, they have to hover, much like a kestrel. When you look at the kind of adaptations they have, that hovering that they do, first of all, there's a thing about their size. These are not like kingfisher birds where they're taking teeny tiny little minnows. These are big 6-foot wingspan birds needing to take huge tench and various fish like that we get in places like Rutland Water. The osprey is adapted, first of all, underneath. You can see the plumage underneath is incredibly pale. And that's if you imagine you're a fish and you're looking up at the sky, maybe for predators, you glance up, you won't be able to see an osprey hovering above you because it kind of looks like a cloud. Above, however, you can see they're very dark, and that's to help them with camouflage when they're sitting on their nest. So they have a very specific plumage adaptation, first of all. Secondly, when they hit the water, they've got very dense plumage. Ooh, let me just get through this. They have very dense plumage. Technology going mad. There we go. Sorry about that. Very dense plumage, and that's kind of waterproof. A bit like you get with seabirds, actually. It has a very oily feel to it, and that's so that they don't soak up lots of water when they actually hit the surface. Next, you'll see they have these talons. Ospreys catch fish using their talons, not using their beaks. So these talons are very specifically adapted. First of all, you can see there's virtually no feathers on the legs themselves, and that's so that those feathers don't get weighed down when they hit the water. Secondly, you might be able to see this here. Most birds have 3 toes pointing forward and 1 pointing backwards. Ospreys are very specifically adapted because they can turn one of their toes 180 degrees, so you get 2 at the front and 2 at the back. This is called zygodactylism, and if you want to challenge your kids and keep them entertained for about 4 hours, try and get them to spell zygodactylism. It's a wonderful word and a great one for Scrabble. Why do they have this adaptation? Well, ospreys, when they catch their fish, they fly into the air and this fish is still alive. They're trying to fly with a very heavy fish at quite considerable speeds back to their nest or a pole where they can sit and eat it. To do this, they need that fish to be streamlined. They can't have this fish flapping around underneath them. So they actually turn the fish around so it's facing forward. Personally, I think it's a little bit cruel. This is the fish's final moments and it's actually flying through the air, but at least it can see where it's going. And they use that special third toe to turn the fish around to make themselves more streamlined. You can see here I was talking about the undercolour. The pale undercolour means that the fish themselves can't see them. There's some other things as well, though. So when they're tearing the fish apart, as you can see, this lovely fish has been eaten here. We have this beak. And most birds of prey have this kind of hooked beak with this very specific little thing at the end, and this allows them to tear the flesh away from the bones. As you can see just there. There's also the eyesight. Ospreys have incredibly powerful eyesight. It's 15 times better than ours. And that's so when they're hovering above a lake, above a reservoir, above the sea, they can see into the water and identify their prey. One final adaptation that I think is absolutely fantastic. Ospreys actually have very specific nostrils. Because they're interacting a lot with water, they actually have nostrils that will close with little valves as soon as they impact on the water. So even though that beak isn't going under the water, even though that head shouldn't be anywhere near the water, they have this as a specific safety mechanism so that they don't suffocate. It seals off the moment they hit the water and stays so until they have taken off. As you can see, they are not like other birds of prey, and this is why I think they are absolutely phenomenal. When you're identifying them, they also have this incredible highwayman's mask, which makes them really stand out, and they actually fly with a bit of like a McDonald's shaped M as they're flying through the air. You get different shapes when different birds of prey fly, and I think ospreys really stand out because they do hover over water, they fly with this M, and they're very, very flappy, as you saw in the video, especially when they're carrying fish. Some of these fish are incredibly heavy, and there have been stories where ospreys have actually got stuck in the water because the fish puts up too much of a fight. They're too overambitious, and I think ospreys have actually drowned because the fish has dragged them underwater and they've not been able to hold their breath for long enough to get free. One of the other absolutely amazing adaptations that ospreys have is all to do with migration. Not all of our birds of prey migrate in the UK. Some of them do, things like honey buzzards do as well, but ospreys are one of the ones that does, and they have the most phenomenal migration stories. If you look at things like swans, ducks and geese, they learn their migration paths from their parents. So that first journey they do it with their parents. The parents teach them the route, the parents teach them where to stop off, the parents teach them how to navigate. Ospreys do not migrate like this. In fact, science isn't entirely sure of how ospreys know where to go, because often the parents will leave. When the chicks are fledged, the parents fly off, they go down south for the winter, leaving their chicks, who may not have even caught a fish before at this point, to find their own way with their own migration. And phenomenally, they actually do it. There is quite a high mortality rate. Only 1 in 3 ospreys will survive until breeding age, which is about 3 or 4 years old. But they find their way on the migration routes on their own, and they end up in roughly the same places as their parents. You can see here a map of the world. Ospreys live in every continent on Earth other than Antarctica, and they migrate all over the place. The one exception to this is Australia. It used to all be one species of osprey, but science has recently split the Australian population off. These are eastern ospreys, and they have been split in part because they don't migrate. You get very long migrations all over the rest of the world, and also very short ones. The shortest one is in the Caribbean, which is marvellous, because they've realised that they quite like living in the Caribbean, so they literally migrate across the Caribbean, and that's it. The other very short one, a bit closer to home, is ospreys in Corsica will migrate to North Africa and then back again. Again, an incredibly short migration. Our ospreys, coming from Scotland and England and Wales, will migrate down here to Senegal and Gambia on the whole. And the longest migration, and you do feel sorry for them, bless them, are ospreys at the top of Scandinavia who decide they're going to migrate the entire way down to the tip of South Africa. I'm pretty sure there's lots of places they could stop off on the way that would be less, using less of their energy, slightly more efficient. You could probably catch plenty of fish, but for some reason, those ospreys migrate that entire way, and whatever works for them. Different populations migrate to different places, and they tend to stay quite isolated. Our ospreys from Rutland Water migrate about 3,000 miles. That migration starts in March, and the quickest one to ever reach it back to Rutland Water took just 10 days. They can fly at an average of about 50 miles an hour, and they tend to follow the same routes over and over again. But how do we know this? Well, we track them. There's 2 different methods of identifying and tracking ospreys. First, you can see here is ringing. There's a BTO ring here, and there's what's called a Darvik ring here, which is made of like plastic and metal, and it's very brightly coloured. And what this allows us to do with spotting scopes and binoculars is identify that bird when we're looking at it. Obviously, though, we can't track it. We can only rely on people actually seeing the bird and then it popping up and us being able to ask the BTO which bird that was. This is a far more sophisticated method, but it's also far more expensive. This is called satellite tracking. And this little box here is attached to the back of an adult osprey. You have to catch them first. That's a whole different story. I'm not even going to go there. It's very stressful. You have to catch the osprey, and you attach this with a little cotton rucksack, and it weighs about the same as a bag of crisps. So they are very specifically designed not to impinge on the osprey itself. And they can come off in the end. Not all of them do, but they can come off, and the osprey can carry on as normal. This tracks altitude, it tracks speed, it tracks location, and that is all reported back to a central computer, and that allows us to physically look at the maps to see where the ospreys are going. I've included some pictures here from the Osprey Flyway itself. So what you can see here is a beach in Gambia. Looking in one direction, it's beautiful, it's clear, it's pristine, and looking in the other direction, these are all of the people from the local towns and villages who have rushed out onto the beach to gather their fish. The fishermen in the background here go out to sea, and then they come back in with their catches, and this is like a market, if you like. Obviously, there are some problems. You do get things like a lot of litter, but some of this is actually from Europe washing up on the currents and hitting their beaches. So it's a far from ideal process. However, these people actually live very harmoniously with ospreys. The fishermen have been known to identify ospreys flying out to sea, and they follow the ospreys because they know the ospreys are catching fish. And that means that they can catch the fish where the ospreys are catching fish. So they actually have a really harmonious relationship, and it's very lovely. One thing I really want to flag up to you is something called the Osprey Leadership Foundation. And this has been born out of the work that Tim McCrill and others have done on ospreys over the years. And essentially what they're doing is they're linking up schools and young people all up and down the Osprey Flyway. And they're training them up and giving them leadership skills in conservation, which is really, really exciting. It allows schools to get in contact with each other, to learn about different cultures, different religions, but they're all united by this one bird, the osprey, and that's incredibly powerful. When they migrate, the schools actually track the ospreys up and down the continent, up and down Africa, up and down Europe, and they share this incredible story with all the other schools as well. It's very exciting. So do check out the Osprey Leadership Foundation because they're doing amazing work. So finally, I'm aware that I don't have that long left, so I'm going to try and whiz through this quite quickly. The thing that I think makes ospreys really impressive is the remarkable story that they've been on with people. Back in, checking my notes, 1847, ospreys actually went extinct in England. They were persecuted, they were shot as trophies, they were seen as vermin in England, and they also suffered massively from egg collecting. So by 1847, no more ospreys across England. They hung on in the Highlands of Scotland until 1916, when the last recorded pair disappeared from Scotland as well. So this is a bird that we have almost completely eradicated from the UK. However, in the 1950s, a pair turned up, possibly from Scandinavia, and decided they were going to try and nest in Scotland at a place called Lochgarten that some of you may have been to. And over the course of a few years, after various attempts to rob the nest, after various breeding failures, the RSPB actually managed to establish this as the first official breeding pair of ospreys in the UK for over 100, in Scotland, sorry, for over, since 1916. Sorry, I'm all over the place there. This is an incredible story because what they actually did was they invited the general public to watch the ospreys rather than keeping them secret, rather than keeping it really quiet and saying, no, we can't tell anyone where they are. They actually invited people to police the ospreys for themselves, to enjoy the scene of watching the ospreys. And it led to something like 12,000 people over the course of 6 weeks coming and viewing these for the very first time. That has led to ospreys essentially coming back all over the UK, specifically in parts of Wales, in parts of England, and spreading out around Scotland as well, and a few in the north of England. The guys at Rutland Water back in 1994 noticed that ospreys were really stopping off at Rutland Water, but they weren't staying to breed, unfortunately. So they wanted to do something to help. Over the course of 6 years, from 1995 to 2001, they actually reintroduced ospreys from the population in Scotland, all under license and partnership with Natural England and Scottish Natural Heritage. And they managed to re-establish the ospreys back at Rutland Water. They were using the reservoirs, which are very well stocked with fish, to feed. And the first breeding pair took place in 2001, which was incredibly exciting. That means that next year will be 20 years of breeding ospreys all around Rutland, which is incredibly exciting. They're spilling out into Leicestershire, Northamptonshire now, and now they've actually massively influenced the population over in Wales as well, and they're popping up in Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Cumbria, all over the place. It's incredibly exciting that this has all happened from this one translocation project. There's now also, in the past couple of years, been some reintroductions down in Dorset as well with the Birds of Poole Harbour project. And this is just so great for ospreys now all over the UK. They're establishing themselves in the south of England. Why is it important to do this? Well, very simply, the scientists have run the figures and they worked out that ospreys would not have reached Rutland Water for 150 years from that population in the Highlands of Scotland. So in order to rectify the mistakes of the past and speed everything up, they've taken action. And you now get sites like this with beautiful pairs of breeding ospreys all around the country, and they are doing really, really well. The population is expanding as more and more birds return from Africa to breed. And of course, with all the TV shows cancelled now, if you want something really exciting to watch, the webcams, especially the Rutland Osprey one at the moment, I am biased, but they have 4 chicks at the Rutland Osprey nest, which is highly unusual. It's the 2nd year running that they've managed it, but Ospreys usually only have 3 chicks. And this pair are now pushing out 4 eggs a year, and it's so exciting, and it is better than Love Island, especially because Love Island is cancelled. Yay. If you want any more resources, I'm going to take some questions in a second, but do check out Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust and their Osprey education scheme. They're doing a huge Ospreys education from home program at the moment, and that's curriculum tied with loads of lessons, everything from maths to English to science to history to art. There's loads of resources there. Have a look at the Osprey Leadership Foundation and have a look at the Birds of Poole Harbour as well, where they're doing the reintroduction down there. Thank you very much. I'll take some questions now, but just before we do that, running in the background. Let's hope that works, and let's stick on the Osprey webcam for you. So thank you very much, Lizzie, for pulling all the questions together. How many Ospreys do we get migrating here in the UK? So there's various figures for this. One thing to bear in mind is that when an Osprey first migrates down to Africa, I think it's so traumatized by the journey, it will actually stay down in Africa for at least 2, if not 3 years before it makes its way back. So it's very hard to tell the exact population. At the last count, there were about 250 breeding pairs of Ospreys, but that is massively increasing. Hugely going up, and you also get individuals coming back who don't establish themselves on a nest, so it's quite difficult to tell, but it's between 250 and 300 breeding pairs at the moment. Any good recommendations for sea Ospreys? So yes, Northwest Wales is an absolute hotspot for them. The Dovey Osprey project has got Ospreys spilling out all over the place. They're pretty well established all over the Highlands of Scotland now as well. And there's also pairs in Cumbria. There are pairs at the Lake District. The Birds of Poole Harbour project down in Dorset have got birds down there as well. And you're now getting them generally spreading out. If you're at any big reservoir or any big lake, it is worth keeping an eye out for them. I saw one at a theme park at Melton Mowbray last year. I nearly crashed my car. I was that excited. Question from Erin. How are Ospreys so camouflaged in the clouds? So this is because Ospreys don't need to be camouflaged from above. They just need to be camouflaged from below when they're flying. If you imagine you're a fish and you're looking up, you can see the white of the Osprey on the bottom, and they can't actually see most of that brown on top. So that doesn't matter. They don't need to be camouflaged when they're actually up in the clouds, if you can see them at eye level. That brown colouring is actually only relevant for when they're on the nest and they hunker down in these absolutely enormous nests, and you can't see them at all. They actually camouflage really, really well. So it's kind of a 2-tiered system depending on where they are. So what do Ospreys like to eat? Yeah, so yes, Ospreys exclusively eat fish. They capture any fish from reservoirs, but they do tend to eat the slightly bigger ones. They're not into kind of your little minnows and things, and they will absolutely rip them apart. What you can see here, I know the camera's actually frozen, but you can see this beak really well. Ospreys look really big and a little bit scary, but actually they're incredibly delicate, and they will feed their chicks incredibly delicately with this hook on the end of their bill. But all they will eat is freshly caught and then dead fish. I think that's all the questions. I think that's everything. Give it another 10 seconds if anyone's got any other questions. I'm aware that I've gone through about an hour and a half lecture in breakneck speed in 20 minutes. So if you do have any questions, ping them over to me on Twitter. I'm at Lucy McRobert1, or you can look me up on Instagram as well. And also please do check out the Rutland Osprey project. Oh, here we go. You can just about see, here are the 4 little chicks. They're not that cute, to be honest. When they're little, they look like kind of baby dinosaurs, but they do get better looking, honestly. And when these chicks are old enough, they will have rings put on them, and hopefully they will make a part of the amazing story that is the Osprey in the UK by coming back to breed and have families of their own. So thank you all very much. I apologise for the absolute chaos there. And if you have any questions, do ping them over to me on social media. There's more Earth Live lessons to come, so do stay tuned with Lizzie. Do sign up to her channels. She has done an absolutely phenomenal job for all of us, and hopefully for all of you as well. So keep me posted and do check in for the next lessons. Thanks, bye.